see me shaking. I said, no, you weren't. I said, yes, I was. But then when I thought about it, looking at the room was like only Dylan and I were only two in the room. Didn't see anybody else while I was going through this. And the next thing I knew, my body just started shaking and it felt like things were leaving me. And from my shoulders on down to my hands. The next thing I know, I'm light as a feather. And I feel this peace like no other. And I'm like, what just happened? But I'm just so peaceful. You know, I mean, he took it all. He freed me. God freed me from the anger and the hate. He freed me from the sorrow, even the sadness I was feeling about my wife. He just took it all away. And I experienced a peace that surpasses all understanding. That's what I experienced. Now, I preached that. My members can tell you, I preached that sermon I don't know how many times. And I thought I was telling them how to get that peace, and we had it, and I had it. We didn't have it because I felt it that day.
And now you do.
Now I do.
9 people were shot dead.
Yeah.
In cold blood.
Cold blood.
They'd gone to church to study the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
This is the last place you expect a crime like this to happen.
Yeah.
And adding a complicating layer to it, this was a hate crime. This was a white man who went to a black church for the purpose of fomenting hate and causing trouble.
Yes.
How did that fact, that additional complicating factor, play on you? This is South Carolina. There's no shortage of racial tension from time to time, or maybe any time. And this was done purposely to stir up racial hatred.
Yeah.
So as a black man whose black wife was shot by a white man intentionally,
yes.
Tell me how that played on you, played with your mind, got at your heart. How did, and was that an extra difficulty to overcome, or in the final analysis, did it make no difference?
Well, to be honest with you, I never thought about that. You know, Dylan was the farthest thing from my mind. You know, all I can think about was my wife, you know, just what was she going through? You know, why wasn't I there? So Dylan never once came to my mind. And once I forgave him, that peace I had, I didn't question anything.
A murder happens. 9 people are left dead. Countless families are upended and thrown into confusion and a haze that most of us could never imagine. And here's a man whose almost first impulse is to forgive. We must find out more, and we will, as my conversation with Pastor Anthony Thompson continues in just a moment. Bible, line upon line, from It Is Written TV.
More and more people are watching It Is Written TV for the first time. They're watching their favorite It Is Written episodes, listening to inspiring sermon series, and much more. They're watching them here, and even here. See for yourself why people are turning to It Is Written TV to watch their favorite Christian programs live and on demand. Watch It Is Written TV for free on Roku and Apple TV, or visit itiswritten.tv.
Planning for your financial future is a vital aspect of Christian stewardship. For this reason, It Is Written is pleased to offer free planned giving and estate services. For information on how we can help you, please call 800-992-2219. Call today or visit our website, hislegacy.com. Call 800-992-2219.
Thanks for joining me. This is Conversations brought to you by It Is Written. My very special guest is Pastor Anthony Thompson. In June of 2015, received the very shocking news that his wife, Myra, was among 9 individuals who lost their lives in a very tragic shooting here in the city of Charleston, South Carolina. But you're much more than a victim. You're much more than somebody. Your story goes way beyond that. You're a church pastor. You've mentioned already 27 years as an agent.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little more about yourself, your background and your history. You served your country, for example.
Yes, I did. Well, I was brought up in a Christian home. My mom and dad strict about us going to church, Sunday school. So I was involved in Sunday school, being on the pulpit, being in lay readers, and doing everything possibly that you possibly could do in the church before I became a pastor. So I guess it was like God's plan already. I was headed that direction. However, I ran from it. And that's when I pursued other avenues, went to college, left college thinking I was going to be a school teacher. And I did an intern at a school, some high school students who I thought maybe this is not for me.
That changed your mind.
That changed my mind. And then I took what I call a left turn, and I became a liaison officer, helping people who had drug problems, trying to give an alternative to going to jail and being in our program. Then from that, I became a probation agent, for the state of South Carolina, which you heard I retired with 27 years. But during the course of all this, I mentored children from 1 year of age to 21 years of age for 40 more years, still doing it right now, especially those who were physically, sexually abused. Yeah, really targeted them.
So yours has been a life of service.
A lot of service.
Helping troubled people.
Yes, always.
You made a very interesting decision to forgive. Why do you think it was important for you to forgive? I'm going to ask you in a moment why it's important for others to forgive. The answers will be related, but maybe not quite the same. Why was it important for you to extend forgiveness?
Well, at the time, I didn't have no idea that I should or should not forgive. Just wasn't, my mind wasn't there. Be honest with you, it was just God's divine intervention. He just came in, put me in a place where I didn't want to be, had me doing something that I really had no idea what I was doing. And then when I did it, that's when I discovered that forgiveness was for me.
What did forgiveness do for you?
It gave me a peace. It enabled me to move forward in my life, because prior to that, I'd already given up. I said, this is it. I don't know what to do. I have no more purpose. And I was really going through like, well, what am I going to do? Because I'd already had in my mind everything I did was for her. So now she's gone. My job is over. Not that I thought about taking my life or anything, but, I just thought it was done. And then here God steps in and put me in a place I don't want to be, have me saying something I had no idea I was going to say, all what it was going to do to me. And then when I received that peace, then he gave me new purpose.
Tell me about that peace. Explain that to me.
Well, it's a little hard to describe. It's like, for once, when I was walking down on the ground on Calhoun Street in that pavement and crying uncontrollably, when I got up, when I got to the bond hearing, I was no longer in control. I was no longer out of control. God had taken control. That's the kind of peace I'm talking about. The peace of knowing that, you know what? Ma was gone, but God promised that she would be with him and she would see him face to face. Control, the peace of knowing that, he gave me new purpose. Because what I didn't tell you is when I received that peace, immediately after that, he came at me again and he said, okay, you got a new mission. And that is to spread the gospel of forgiveness. So he gave me a new purpose, so that's what that peace entails. New purpose, God being in control of my life, and me being able to move forward.
This is such an important subject because everybody has forgiveness issues. Parents, teacher, employer, spouse, children, neighbor, colleague, mailman, everybody has forgiveness issues somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me why, from your point of view, and certainly from a biblical point of view, you're a man of the Bible, tell me why forgiveness is just so important.
It's very important because the world interprets forgiveness as letting the person off the hook.
Right. But forgiveness is not letting a person off the hook.
It's not. It's letting yourself off the hook. because the forgiveness is for the one who had been offended, not for the one who offended you. You know, it's to grant you peace. You know, it's to give you the satisfaction that you're looking for sometimes in other means, through hate or anger or revenge, because that's the natural inclination of most people. You know, I'm going to get this person back. I'm just going to be angry. I'm going to be mad. But then this person doesn't know you're mad or angry. Neither do they have an idea that you're going to take revenge. So they're going on with their life like Dylan. Dylan has no remorse. You see? So forgiveness was not for him. It's for me, so that I can be released from Dylan's control. You see, his purpose was to start a race war, to have control, you know, to guide us in a certain direction, a violent direction, a direction that Satan himself would want us to go into. But then that forgiveness released me from that. And it released our family, our church, and it released our community from that.
That's a very interesting point, too, because many people were expecting that once 9 people had been shot in an historic church by someone bent on hate, some people believed that Charleston could have just descended into an absolute mess. There could have been rioting and violence and anger and demonstrations, but none of that happened. So speak to me about the connection between the forgiveness demonstrated and how that impacted not just you, but as you mentioned a moment ago, the community.
Okay. Well, first of all, like you said, the community did not expect that. The community did expect us to start a race war, like Dylan wanted. They expected us to burn down the city, find a white person, beat him to death, or whatever. But forgiveness, the act of forgiveness, conquered all that. You know, when you think about what Isaiah said concerning Jesus down on the cross, he said, by his stripes we are healed. That was 500 years before it actually happened. 500 years later, here comes Jesus down on the cross and saying, Father, forgive them for what we did to him. You understand what I'm saying? For they know not what they do. And the whole world was healed that day. Just like Isaiah said, by his stripes we are healed. And so that's what forgiveness does. And that's why the city and everybody reacted the way they did, because of God's divine intervention. Forgiveness, an act of forgiveness, just bring him in. And he changes people's hearts. He changes people's attitudes. And that's what happened in the city of Charleston, because everybody just came together.
When you say people came together, tell me what that looked like.
I mean, it affected everybody. Everybody was in tears. I mean, hugging each other, consoling each other, encouraging each other, wanting to do something to make somebody's life better. Not necessarily the loved ones of the victims, but any and everybody. It didn't matter. Whoever they came in contact with that day, they wanted to make your life better. You know, we had 15,000 or more people stretching hands across from Emmanuel Church across the 2.5-mile bridge all the way to Mount Pleasant, praising the Lord, having a good time, trying to find out what could we do different. Now, you think about Charleston, South Carolina, being the city where slaves came, slavery was prevalent. You know, two-thirds of the slaves came here. And then after slavery, whatever language to a minimum, put it like that, then you have a city like this who's very hospitable, but then you have the undertone of racism. Mm-hmm. Okay? But that day, it began to get lesser and lesser and lesser. For some reason, people began to just want to turn a new leaf. People began to understand what happened back then, what could have happened after the tragedy, and it didn't happen. And I think people just started feeling shame and guilt, and at the same time, just a love for each other. I preached at a church, predominantly white church in Mount Pleasant, and it was about your light of the world, and it had to do about forgiveness in the end. And a white lady about my age stood up, and she said, Reverend Thompson, I used to be a racist. I'm like, okay, we need to clear this air. What else is coming? She said, but I repented of racism when I heard about you and the families, other family members, forgiving Dylan? She said, because I realized that, God is real. And I realized I was wrong, and she didn't want to be labeled with Dylan, with his intentions of starting a race war. And she had her 2 boys there. She said, because she wanted them to be here for this occasion and hear what she had to say. And she talked about how she learned racism, how when she got older, she found out it was still wrong, but peer pressure, status, and all this other stuff. But just the act of forgiveness alone was what brought her to repent. And after she got through one by one, white, male, female start standing up, same story. So that's what forgiveness does.
If you had stood up at that hearing and said, I hate you and your people are going to pay, if you'd taken the bait, what might have happened?
It could have been really bad because you had people here. You had the Black Panther Party. You had Black Lives Matters. You had everybody who wanted to rebel, who wanted to start a march, who wanted to do something to instigate some kind of violence in the city of Charleston. And we told them, we don't need you here. So it could have been, it could have went the other way. But like I said, that forgiveness again kicked in and we told them, we don't need you here. And they left. You hear it on the documentary. One of the guys said, you know what, we came here to rally, to rebel, to get things going, to do something about this. He said, but that act of forgiveness, he said, is over.
Power of forgiveness.
Yeah, it was over.
Let me ask you a question. So racism is as old as the United States, older, but in this country, it's as old as the country is. It seems to me that if you have 2 peas here and 2 beans there, then they're going to find some reason to not get along.
Yeah.
This is probably a question that would take a lifetime to answer, but from your perspective, if we're going to really experience healing from racism, what's it going to take? How do we get there?
Well, that's what we're doing here in Charleston right now. Okay, the first thing we did, we started reaching across denominational barriers, cultural barriers. The church started. That's where it's supposed to start, in the church. Now the church is taking responsibility in the city of Charleston. And we, like my church, for example, we're associating with some of the biggest predominantly white churches in the Charleston area. We're exchanging pulpits. Every Lent season, our congregations exchange churches, Bible study, everything, trying to find out, who are you? You're more than just white and we're more than just black. We want to find out, just who are you, Bob? Who are you? You understand what I'm saying? That's what we're doing. The mayor mandated a resolution recognizing, acknowledging, and apologizing for the part that Charleston took in slavery. I mean,
a very major part.
Yes, a very major part. They did that on the anniversary date of the tragedy, just this last year. Okay. The mayor just started a new department in his office for the first time anywhere in the United States of America called the Department of Racial Reconciliation. Just hired a new director for that position just last week. So those are the kind of things we're doing. Those are the changes being made in Charleston. We're talking about slavery. We're talking about racism. We have forums, I don't know how many forums a year, talking about racial reconciliation. The mayor formed a team called an advisory council of pastors, over 300 pastors, and the focus is on racial reconciliation, repentance, and forgiveness.
I want to talk to you for a moment, and this is going to take us, we'll talk up to the break and then beyond the break. But as a man of the book, as a man of the cloth, talk to me about, from your perspective, forgiveness from a biblical point of view.
Forgiveness from a biblical point of view is that, first of all, it's a command. You said it. God commands us to forgive. And with that, he says, love one another as you love yourself. And it says, forgive those who trespass against you. And if you want me to forgive you, then you have to forgive those who trespass against you. So biblically, forgiveness is when you truly, sincerely from your heart forgive somebody, and once you've done that, you have no anger, no hate, no malice. You're not thinking about taking revenge. Secular forgiveness is people who say, you're condoning this guy's crime. How could you forgive him, And I'm not condoning his crime. He's spending time, so he's being, he's being penalized for what he did.
But people do feel that if you forgive, then you're letting them off the hook.
Yeah, you're letting them off the hook, And then they say, well, forgiveness is a feeling. So they ask me, well, you're feeling like you wanted to forgive him, but it's not a feeling, because first of all, you have nothing to do with what happens after you do it. You have nothing to do with it at all. It takes God to help you to forgive.
Yes, it does. You're starting to touch on some very, very important things. We're going to explore them more. I'll be right back with Pastor Anthony Thompson. Forgiveness. Just a moment. I'm John Bradshaw from It Is Written, inviting you to join me for 500. 9 programs produced by It Is Written, taking you deep into the Reformation. This is the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the Reformation, when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany. We'll take you to Wittenberg and to Belgium, to England, to Ireland, to Rome, to the Vatican City, and introduce you to the people who created the Reformation, who pushed the Reformation forward. We'll take you to sites all throughout Europe where the Reformers lived and in some cases died. We'll bring you back to the United States and take you to a little farm in upstate New York and show you how God spread the Reformation here. Don't miss 500. You can own the 500 series on DVD. Call us on 888-664-5573 or visit us online at itiswritten.shop. Thank you for remembering that It Is Written exists because of the kindness of people just like you. To support this international life-changing ministry, please call us now at 800-253-3000. You can send your tax-deductible gift to the address on your screen, or you can visit us online at itiswritten.com. Thank you for your prayers and for your financial support. Our number again is 800-253-3000, or you can visit us online at itiswritten.com. Welcome back to Conversations brought to you by It Is Written. We're talking about one of the most important things we could ever discuss, the subject of forgiveness. And I know, people have forgiveness issues. But what we're talking about here is not a forgiveness issue. I mean, a moment ago, you talked about forgiveness and the command to forgive and how a person ought to forgive. And from a biblical point of view, you ought to forgive. And here's what I know. There are people who are still shaking their head. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, I understand what he said. That's why I forgave my neighbor when his tree crashed on my fence. I forgave that. That's why I forgive that man in the parking lot who backed his car into my car and dented my fender. Yeah. People understand that. You step on my foot. I'm so sorry. Oh, think nothing of it. I understand it was an accident. Yeah. What your family has experienced, what so many families have experienced in the wake of this terrible shooting in Charleston, was not someone standing on your foot. No. But what you're talking about is forgiveness without limits. Yeah. So I'd like you to challenge that person right now who is saying, I understand forgiveness when you borrowed my shovel and you knew you should have returned it, but you didn't, so you stole it. People understand that. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about forgiving one of the worst acts of hatred that could ever take place. You're taking us to a new place in forgiveness. Yeah. I mean, forgiveness is a choice. God puts it before you to make that choice. And you have to let God be the judge. He says, judge not, and you be not judged. Condemn not, you be not condemned. And then right after that, he says, forgive. Because it's you don't know this person's heart. You don't know what they went through in their life. You don't know who hurt them. You don't know who offended them for them to do what they did to you. That's why God says, bless your enemies, right?
okay, it's a deeper understanding. Bless your enemies, because it's not really that person. It's the evil that's in that person, like the evil that was in Dylan, you understand, that caused him to do what he did, you know. And so I can't help but bless him. You understand? Because first of all, he's a sinner, just like I'm a sinner. God forgave me, so why can't I forgive him? You know, I don't understand. Why can't a sinner not forgive another sinner? I mean, it just doesn't make sense if you can't. You know, I mean, because people look at like this, they say, well, I can't forgive him because I can forgive him because he lied to me, but I can't forgive him because he committed a murder. You know, we have this natural inclination again to make things one sin bigger and one smaller.
Forgetting, of course, that we're all murderers, in as much as it was our sin that cost the life of Jesus. I understand someone saying, yeah, but that's different. And it is, and it isn't. You said a moment ago about the feelings that accompany or don't accompany forgiveness. Walk through that, because someone thinks that if I forgive you for some terrible thing that you've done to me, that suddenly I need to have you over, have Thanksgiving dinner, and we're going to walk arm in arm down Main Street. That's not the case.
Not the case.
So how can you forgive without having those rosy feelings?
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of people feel like reconciliation is part of forgiveness. And this is where the point about, you know, well, when I forgive you, we're going to pray together. We're going to hold hands. We're going to become friends, you know, but I never knew Dylan. You know, so there's no reconciliation, you know. So it doesn't take reconciliation to forgive somebody. There's some points where you may be a friend, or it may have been a mother, a father, a sister, brother, and you want reconciliation because you had something going on. You had a friendship. You had a relationship. And so you're forgiving, hoping, you understand, that we're going to get back together. Things are going to be much better. That's a difference, you know, but it doesn't require reconciliation to forgive somebody.
Right.
No.
Somewhere along the line, you made a decision that you were going to write a book. Talk to me about the process of writing a book that had to have been cathartic on one hand and extraordinarily difficult on the other. You had to relive some things. You had to have some conversations. You had to go places in your thinking and in your heart. Talk to me about that process.
Initially, it was pretty tough. I didn't want to do it. You know, I really didn't want to do it because I know, you know, what I was thinking at the time, and I hadn't mourned yet, you know, and I miss my wife every day. That's never going to go away. And so it took some prayers and some people praying for me, actually, for this to go about. As a matter of fact, there's a pastor named Marshall Blaylock at First Baptist Church. That's the church where I preached at first about forgiveness. I think I was the first black to preach there. And it's the First Baptist Church in the United States of America. He and I got close and met his wife, and she came to me and she said, Reverend Thompson, I know you're going to write a book. I'm like, yeah. She said, no, I know you're going to write a book. I'm like, yeah. She said, no, I know you're going to write a book. And I'm like, okay, it was going to take her to get her off of me. Yes, I'm going to write a book. And then she said, well, I know somebody, I'll call them if you don't mind me passing your info. I said, oh, go ahead. I figured that was a done deal. And the next day I get a call from this lady named Denise George. I'm like, what? She said, I heard you want to write a book. And the first thing came to my mind, the Spirit of the Lord came and said, pray about it. You're not ready. Because I know I wasn't. I was still, I didn't want to bring all that bad stuff back up. Mm-hmm. You know, I did not want to do that. I know taking and writing a book would do that.
Sure.
You know, and I prayed, and the lady who called, she prayed with me. We prayed for about a month. Then her agent, he got in touch with me, and I told him, I said, nope, we're going to pray about this. You pray, I'll pray, she pray, and we'll see what God says. I said, because that's the only way that's going to happen.
Was it a difficult process? Did you find it a difficult process or a helpful process, or both, writing the book?
At first it was a little difficult, but then as I began to talk, because we communicated email, text, I went to Birmingham and stayed there for a couple of weeks and we talked. And so each step of the way, it was like venting. I began to get it out. I began to feel better. And I started seeing where God was in it. And then that's what made the difference. That's when it made it very easy to write, because I knew he had a purpose in my life for writing it. And then I started thinking about what he said at the bond hearing. This is your new mission, gospel forgiveness. So I'm like, oh, okay, then this is your book, you know. And I call it his book. I don't call it my book, it's his book. You know, I say, so this is another way of getting it out. So as I began to talk about Myra and the 8 people, you know, and then getting into seeing the good that God brought out of the tragedy, I was in awe. And then I became very comfortable. And then from speaking, before I actually wrote the book, speaking to people across the United States, I learned the real reason, you know, I mean, God knows everything. I found out what he was saying, this is needed, because I found out that people, the kind of questions they had, and they didn't know, they wanted to do it, didn't know how to do it. And so I gained all that knowledge, and I was able to take that and put it in the book.
Called to Forgive. Explain the title.
I've been in that situation so many times, but not with such a tragedy that happened in my life concerning my wife. I can remember growing up, you know, having things thrown at from a white person. And at first I didn't really understand what that was all about, because my father was a military man. We were in the military. People in the military, we all got along, white, black, Asian, you know. So I came to Charleston and was like, wow, what was that about? And my cousins, they were running behind this person, want to get this person back, and I'm standing in the corner like, why are they doing that? And then they come back to me and say, what's wrong with you? Why are you trying to get these guys? You know what they did to us? I said, yeah. I said, well, why are we doing this? Then I learned about this racism. And I went home and I talked to my mom and dad about it. And they said, well, did you run with them? You know, did you run with your cousin? I said, no. They said, well, good. I said, you're not, because you don't do that. You know?
Where are we on race as a country? Where are we?
You know, we started out maybe 8 or 10 years ago, trying to pull together, you know, trying to talk about this thing, trying to, you know, acquaint ourselves with each other. And then just maybe 4 years ago, it was thrown back in our face. And it's being thrown back in our face every day now. So we're almost back where we started, you know, clearly. And it's getting worse every day. You know, it only takes one person, okay? It only takes one person of authority. And that's the way I feel about this nation. You know, if you're in charge and you're expressing racism and you're taunting people because of their differences, then those who've been wanting to do it and been secretly hiding, they're going to join the party. And that's where we are right now.
Do you think everyday people, and you're the right person to ask about this because you witnessed people holding hands across a bridge, and you witnessed people coming together, and you witnessed and you heard people say, I was looking to do this, but my heart has changed. The man in the street, the woman in the street, is that person looking for a healthy way forward, or are they looking to hang on to their hate? Very general question.
Yes.
But what do you see?
They're looking to change, you know, but they're looking for somebody to motivate them to change, they're looking for somebody to say, you know what, I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking. And I know you've been thinking that for 10 years, but now that you know I'm thinking that, we can get together on this, we can make some moves, you know, and that's what's happening here. You know, I can see people really want to change. I can remember there was the atmosphere was so cold one time when you open the door for somebody and they walk through the door and don't turn around and say thank you or nothing, just like you're supposed to do that for me. Well, it's a little different now. You open the door and they turn around, oh, thank you. And they'll open the door back for you. So that's what I see. You know, I see it here.
You see progress.
And yeah, I see progress. People are seeking, you know, to change. You know, and they're looking for a leader. They're looking for somebody to say, yeah, let's do this. You know, and so I'm telling you, this forgiveness thing, people are latching on to it because they see that this is the way to do it. You know, we each have to start there. We have to start by forgiving each other. You know, because it's not just a white thing, it's a black and white thing. It's both sides got to the point now where hate and angry and all this other stuff. You know, not talking about how it happened, but the point is that's where we are. So that's where we need to start. We need to start right there. You know, we need to stop defining each other by color, cultural differences, language barriers, and need to get to know each other. That's what we're trying to do here. That's who I am. You know, I'm not, this is not who I am. My heart is who I am. So come to find out where I am here. And then we can begin to change. You know, because then we're going to find out that we have a lot in common and we got some of the same ideas and we want some of the same things. We're too scared to tell each other that for fear of, you know, putting yourself out there and being taken advantage of. But it's not going to, you know, so.
What have you heard from people who've been impacted by your story, by your experience?
I've had people tell me that I've gotten all kinds of things from, I started going back to church, haven't gone to church in years, things from, I'm calling my mama right now, I'm getting on the plane, I'm going to tell my sister, I forgive her. I had a young man, I was in Vermont, and I was talking at an Episcopal church in Vermont, and this young man came up to me and he said, I have a sister, a twin sister, and man, he said, we haven't talked to each other for 27 years. I said, y'all twins? Twins don't do that. He said, well, yes, we do. He said, because she's waiting for me to apologize, and I'm waiting for her to apologize. He said, what should I do? I said, be the bigger man. Call her up right now. Don't apologize. Tell her you forgive her. I said, she probably going to tell you the same thing. He said, I'm going to do that right now. And he did. And she told him the same thing I told her she would. And he said, I'm going to see her tomorrow. Things like that. Yeah, I mean, and so, and that's where I get my reward. And so that's what made the book so interesting. And that's what made it so good to write. I was able to get past, the looking at the tragedy of something sad. Yeah.
What do you think Myra, your wife, would tell you today about your ministry and going forward from here?
Well, she would tell me, you're doing a great job, but you need to do more. That's what she would say. She would say, you're doing a great job, you need to do more. And, she would encourage me.
You spoke earlier about the peace she had that day, that terrible day, the peace she had as she was floating, not walking. There's be something about her. Tell me a little about her. What kind of person was she?
Myra was an extraordinary person. When I say extraordinary, I'm not defining it like you normally would. I'm beyond, I just can't come up with another word. She's a very loving person. She was a loving wife, a loving mother, loving grandmother. She was a teacher, a counselor, a minister, but the greatest of her gifts was giving. I thought I was a giver. I can't even touch her. Everything she did, from the time she was able to go out on her own and go to college, where she wanted to become a teacher, she wanted to become a teacher so she can benefit, other people can benefit. Not her. It wasn't about having a degree. It was about getting that degree because somebody else needed your services. That's what she did. She went and got a master's in reading, master's in counseling for the sake of her students, the school she was teaching at. It was a very disruptive school with disadvantaged kids, orphan kids. They had a lot of baggage, and so they were very disrespectful, cursing and carrying on. But she saw beyond all that. She saw the real problem, and she went to school to come and fill that need, change the whole school. Quiet down. It was quiet. The whole school started with a classroom, then before the whole school quiet down. Teachers would come get her. Then she went and got it in counseling because she wanted to get to them a little closer. And the kids who were not going to counseling started going to counseling. That's the kind of person Myra was. Myra, nobody was a stranger to Myra. Okay? I remember after the tragedy, she had to rent a car. I took the car back to the rental place, and people said, we're sorry what happens. I said, but your wife, they loved her so much. She just met them for 5, maybe 30 minutes. And they said they fell in love with her so much. She told them how to do their job. She said, well, we're not going to accept any money. I went to pick up our car. Our car is being fixed at Nissan. Went to pick it up. People said, well, we heard what happened to your wife. And everybody from the maintenance shop, from the body shop, to the people who serve you, came and got me and told me, said, man, your wife, wherever she went, she just took charge.
Thanks so much for joining me. Arnold Hooker has been a missionary for more than a quarter of a century and has compiled more experiences than we have time to talk about. As a missionary and as an advocate for missions, Arnold's life of mission service has resulted in great things being done by God. This is our conversation. Arnold, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. You're a missionary. Now you're a coordinator of missionaries, but more about that later. How did you get involved in mission work?
Well, you know, when you're a young person, you think, I'd like to be a missionary. And in fact, I tried to get into ADRA, but I was a furniture maker. My father was a furniture maker, and my brothers are furniture makers. And so what happened was they said, we don't need your skills. We need, someone with pastoral skills, or we need someone who, can do agriculture or something like that. So I kept filling they used to, in those days, you put quarters into envelopes. It would hold $40 worth of quarters and send them to ADRA. I thought, that's all you need to do. Send in your money to ADRA and you're doing your part for mission. And I found a magazine one day called Frontier Mission Magazine, Adventist Frontier Missions, and I read it, and I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And someone prompted me to maybe start online, and it wasn't online then, actually, to call them up and see if that would be something I could do. And that's kind of how it started.
Okay, let's rush through this, but we'll come back. So you have spent how much time where? Where have you served?
Well, I spent 6 years in Cambodia, and then actually coming back to the U.S. For several years, finding funds for sending missionaries and stuff. But for the last 6 years now, being field director in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Papua New Guinea.
All right.
And also Nepal. Earlier we were in Nepal. Yeah.
All right. So Cambodia, and where do we begin? Tell me about your time in Cambodia. What were you there to do, and what did you do?
In Cambodia, we were there to church plant. And church plant simply means to learn the language. All Adventist Frontier missionaries have to learn language. And so I learned the language. And then we just made friends with people, just like you would next door to your home here in the United States. You make friends with people, and kept learning language. I used to go to the people and say, am I saying this right? They would laugh at me, and finally they stopped laughing, and I was saying the words right, and then just invite them. We had an English school and different things to invite people to get them interested in our book rack. We had, different things to share with them, already written, some of the things written in that time, Bible studies and so on. And we just...
So you went to Cambodia in what year?
I believe it was January or March of 1995.
Okay, so we're going back a few years now. What was the landscape like religiously? Talk to me what it was like to be a Christian in Cambodia then. I want you to tell me, too, about the political situation, that is, as it relates to daily life and as it may or may not impact Christianity at that time.
Well, many of your viewers are going to know about Pol Pot. And Pol Pot was still alive during that time when we were there. The Khmer Rouge was just kind of phasing out, and a new government was coming in. In those days when we went, we would go through road blocks, and they would check through your luggage and everything. They opened our luggage many times.
Was there hostility towards Christians?
I don't think there was hostility towards Christians. I think there was an opening there that had never been before. They were coming out of diversity, trouble like they had never had in their country, and they were looking for answers. And I think Christians at that time and different organizations were there taking care of the people like they'd never been taken care of by their own government. It was so poor. When we went there, they really wanted us to be there. We provided gifts and different things simply by helping with English classes, medicine, and I can remember taking people to the hospital. I took pregnant ladies and rushed them to the hospital. I nearly had a baby inside my old Jeep. I had an old, at the time, a Vietnam veteran old Jeep that was left over from the Vietnam War that I had found, and I was using that for an ambulance. And it was a different time. Now it seems like the government has grown wealthy in some ways, and they don't need the Christian or the NGOs there anymore.
There's so much to talk about. I want to try not to miss too much of it, but let's walk through some of the practical sides of mission work. Because one of the things I hope, in fact, one of the things I know as we talk, there are going to be numerous people who say, yeah, I felt like God is calling me to either be a full-time missionary or to become more active in supporting mission work. You went from the United States to Cambodia, which when you went, there was a whole lot more primitive, if I can use that word, than it is now. Walk me through that process. You went there with children. You went to a country that was very different from what you were like now, what the United States is like now, or what it is like now. What's that culture shock transition like when you go from a first world Western nation to a country presumably you'd never been to before?
You know, when you get off the plane, immediately you realize that you don't speak the language. I mean, they're speaking Cambodian, and they're coming at you really fast with their language. You don't understand it anyway, and it sounds like they're angry with you. And I can remember the smells because there were no public bathrooms or and stuff like this. The smells were, and the heat magnified that smell, and just the flies and the different things that it was just totally different. And finding a place to live, we were blessed because Scott and Julie Griswold were there ahead of us, and they had found us a temporary place to live while we learned language and stuff.
Not all missionaries have it that good, right?
No. In fact, them getting there, they were in the Khao Dong camps and the camps of Thailand. After the war, they were helping there, and then they came into Cambodia to help the Cambodians later. So they'd already been there and understood the language and so on and so forth.
So you get to a place like that, did you ever say, we just got to get on the plane and fly straight home?
I can tell you many times, you have, with tears in your eyes, you wonder why you even came here. And, I don't mean it bad, but people can be misunderstanding of you and misunderstand you. And misunderstandings happen, and I've been spit at. I've been, I can tell you story after story. But anyway, it's just a different place, and you have to learn how to use their rules, not your own.
Right.
And I remember being very American and thinking, I'm going to do it the way, I grew up understanding how things are done, and you just can't do things
You've got to adapt. You've got to be very adaptable, I suppose, when you go to a foreign place, like a very foreign place. You've been based relatively recently in Australia, going from the United States to Australia. No big deal other than the distance, but going to Cambodia? So what are some of the, I don't want to major in the challenges, but I sure do want you to tell me about them. What are some of the real challenges? You get there and you bed down, you find a place, and now life has got to crank up. What are some of the things that you faced or that missionaries face that people like me, we just don't understand or don't know about?
Well, one of the things that you can think about is like medical help. My little girl and I got in a motorcycle crash we had 4 of us on a motorcycle, but anyway, we crashed and there was nowhere to go. We had to treat our own wounds and
just nowhere to go.
No, at that time there was no medical facilities. Now there's plenty of them now, but in those days there was no doctors, no nurses available, and so you had to be your own doctor and nurse, and that's a little scary, especially. I can remember when my family members was sick, and I had to give them, medicine that I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew they had malaria, so I had to prescribe it, give it to them, and it cured the sickness, and no one died. But it's a little scary being having to do those kind of things for yourself, and that's the way it was when we first went there.
Now, you mentioned children. So tell me what it's like taking children to the mission field. Again, you didn't go to Australia. You went to Cambodia at a time when, as we've already talked, things were a whole lot more primitive than they are now. So what's it like for the mission family to take kids, little kids, into an environment like that?
For the most part, it's 100% positive. I took a 2.5-year-old. My youngest daughter was 2.5, Hannah, and the people just loved her. This little girl that they didn't see very often. Her first words were, "Don't touch me and don't lift up my dress," because they would come and look underneath her dress and want to see what she looked like and stuff. It was just, totally all, different for them. And I can remember getting on a ferry boat, and she had been learning how to sing Cambodian songs. She was about 4.5 by this time, and she took the mic off of the captain had always invited us into the cabin of the ferry boat that took us from one side of the river to the other. She pulls the mic off the wall, and she sings, "Pre Jesus ra lang kmengdo, Jesus loves me, this I know." And the captain just looks at her and smiles. And 450 people on this boat are listening to "Jesus Loves Me" in Khmer from a little girl. And why I say they're an asset is because children learn the language much faster than I do. I can remember getting a phone call, and the person would be chatting so quickly I couldn't understand what they were saying. I'd hand it to one of the kids, and they'd say, "Oh, Dad, this person crashed, over here, and you got to go help them. They're on such and such street, such and such an avenue, and they need help." And so I'd go, but I couldn't understand because the person was speaking high-speed Cambodian, and so you have to force yourself to learn language. So we learned language, but the children were an asset because they learned the language so much faster. In fact, my Hannah, who lives right here in Tennessee and within a mile or 5 miles of here, she speaks without intonation. If you talk to her on a phone and she's speaking Khmer, you won't know she's not a Cambodian.
Even after all these years?
Even after all these years.
Wow. So what was your living situation like? Did you live in the country? Did you live in the city? Were you on a busy street in an apartment building? What was that like?
Well, we found a little house to rent, and within that first year, it flooded all the way to the second story. It was 2 stories. And I can remember in those days, there was a medical clinic that had opened up for women, and this lady was burning her needles in the ditch, burning the garbage from her clinic there. And the water came up, and I remember walking out and thinking, I know that those needles are around here, and we were walking out in bare feet, And I mean, it was, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's just so different. Things that you don't expect to happen.
Yeah, like a flood.
Yeah.
Flooding your house out.
Yeah, I had rats come in. I had literally a rubber bat. The rats would come up the stairs, and I'd bop them on the head and knock them into the water, and another one would come up because it was high ground. The Mekong supposedly only once in 10 years would do this, and it actually did it twice while we were in that house. The river came up, and that was really disheartening for some. But, the people that lived near us, they came over to our house because it was 2 stories. Their houses were lots of them 1 story, stayed with us, and they said, you remained with us through the flood. You really must love us. And it made inroads that we couldn't have made.
Yeah, so those challenges were really allowed by God because He saw the end from the beginning, saw how that would be an asset to you.
That's right.
Yeah. Practical things, it didn't take me long to start thinking about food when you talk about an Asian country. What was the food like, and was there an adaptation process, and was that difficult?
They have a lot of fruits and vegetables that we have here, so that really wasn't that hard. And I fell in love with Cambodian curry. It's kind of sweet and savory and very nice. I found out later they used the anchovies and a few things that I wasn't used to eating. But we found that they could leave it out too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So the food was okay.
The food is very good in Cambodia. Well, they eat a lot of different things that we don't eat, but I mean, to find food, it was fairly easy.
Yeah, but you had to live without lasagna and peanut butter and a bunch of stuff. So that's another practical change you had to wrestle with.
You know, you could get those things, but it was like 10 times what it would cost in the United States. So if you wanted lasagna, like you mentioned, it was fairly expensive. And lots of times the bugs had already gotten into the package. So, you know, they say you've been a missionary too long when you throw the cereal out and eat the bugs, you know. So our food often got buggy, but you know, now that it's changed, after 5 years, you can go to they have big grocery stores there now and everything. So it's not like it was, but we would find things past pull date, sometimes 2 years. I remember getting peanut butter that was just like almost solid in the thing. We stirred it and stirred and stirred it. It was peanut butter though. And when you miss something, you want peanut butter, you know.
So you move to a foreign country. It's hot as anything. The weather's lousy, unless you like that kind of thing. You crash a motorcycle with 2 of your kids on board. There's no doctor. Your house floods. Not just that, you're worried about stepping on hypodermic needles that the lady doctor dumps in the ditch outside your house. You're eating food you're not accustomed to, and so on. You're a long way from home. The kids aren't seeing their grandparents hardly ever. But you hung in there because you do. You hung in there because there was a purpose. There was something driving you. You were there to church plant. So let's flip this now. Let's start talking about the work, the mission work, the outreach that you were doing. So we've spoken about this a little bit. You're in a foreign country. Initially didn't speak the language. Sounds like everybody's angry when they talk, and that's how Cambodian sounds if you're not familiar with it. But you got about the business of sharing Jesus. So you talked about making friends with people. Let's drill down this, because you were there for a reason, and the hazards are the hazards and the troubles are the troubles, and that's what missionaries deal with. God bless them. How'd you go about church planting? Let's talk about what happened. People wanted Jesus. Walk me through this.
You know, our ministry was primarily to younger people, because we did start an English school, and we didn't think it was going to be all that great. So we put up some posters and banners around the city.
Yeah, why did you start an English school?
Because we found out that if you were a Cambodian who spoke English, you could get jobs at the new airports that were coming into the country, and in the tourist trade you could find work and stuff. And so the kids were keen to learn Chinese or English. And there was a Chinese school right up the road, so we weren't going to do competition with that, and I don't speak Chinese anyway, so we started an English school. And we put a advertisement out just on little posters all over, and we were overwhelmed. 250 kids came out of this little village and wanted to be in our English school. Wow. It dwindled off after a while, because I'll tell you, we weren't prepared for 250. We had to do it in rotation at first. We had even student missionary help, and my older children, Shiloh, she was able to do English teaching, even though she was, I think maybe 13 or 14 at the time. And Josh, my other son, he helped. And even Hannah, the youngest, she got involved in helping. People just love to hear a little girl speak in English and go through a lesson or whatever.
So this was a way for you to get into the community, learn to meet people, and take it from there. Yeah. And
then we started a Pathfinder group. We started doing things that the kids had never done. I found canals and different places to take them out in the truck and go swimming, and just floating on inner tubes. And a lot of them didn't swim. They were too far away from where we were at in Kampong Cham. There was the river there, but a lot of them didn't go in the river. It was kind of a dangerous place that went up and down. A lot of kids went into the river, but a lot of the kids didn't swim. So we would go to find places where they could stand on the bottom and splash and whatever, just enjoy being kids.
Let me ask you a question I should have asked you already. Where's Cambodia? And where in Cambodia were you?
Okay. So Cambodia is pasted between Thailand and Vietnam, and Laos just above, and China just above the whole thing.
Okay.
And so,
and going there, it's a settled. When you were there, it was a settled place. You mentioned Pol Pot and a new government coming in. Was it explosive? Was it dangerous? How would you describe it?
When we went, there was more landmines in the ground than people above the ground. And one of the things we had to teach our kids is to notice the landmine signs, because kids will play and stuff. And even after a bank built a bank on a piece of property, and they had minesweepers come in after it had already been dubbed okay, and they found 3 more landmines. And so they would take the landmines out during the day, and then Pol Pot would put them in during the night. And so, it was...
So as a missionary, you went to a place that was literally a minefield. And where within the country were you?
We were in a place called Kampong Cham. And Kampong Cham was a village camp of the Cham, Kampong Cham. This is where the Muslims were. Although we weren't targeted at the Muslims at the time, the idea was that we would reach the Cambodian people at large. So we worked with the Buddhist people at that time.
Okay, were you near a big city? Were you near a small town? How far was it to civilization?
Phnom Penh was the largest big city, and that was, of course, the capital city. When you got supply, you went into Phnom Penh. Of course, it's not that way today. Now, Kampong Cham has supermarkets and so on.
Okay. You established an English language school, and the purpose for you being there was to share Jesus with people. So
That's right.
How did you do that, practically speaking? There was a time at some stage you got to open up the Bible. You got to get to that. So when you've gone to a very foreign culture, not a Christian culture like we live in here in the United States, how do you start building those bridges? Because one reason I ask you this is that principle that is employed in the mission field is important for us to employ in the home mission field. So how did that happen?
Friendship evangelism's tried and true. Making friends with someone, loving people, eating with them. I can remember the kids would come and they'd be hungry. So we'd put some kind of crackers or something out and make sure that they had a little something in their tummy or whatever. And I introduced popcorn to them. I'd brought bags of popcorn from the United States, and they hadn't had that before. We would pop it and put it out on the porch, and the kids would just try a little. They were very polite. They wanted more, but they'd take a handful and eat it. And now it's a pretty popular thing over in Cambodia. I'm not saying I did that, but I'm just saying it's popular now. But it wasn't when we first got there. You had to bring your own popcorn from the United States.
Yeah, it's a way to make friends, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just loving people. Whatever we did, we took kids with us wherever we went. When we went on vacation, there would be a couple of kids go along with us from the village.
Yeah.
And the kids always had the kids over for eating with us, and whatever we did, we just enjoyed the people and started being a part of them instead of the opposite.
What sort of spiritual receptivity did you find?
I think that at the time there was a good spiritual receptivity, but one of the things that I found was lots of times people just want to be with the foreigners sometimes. Doing cross-cultural ministry is very good because people want to know the foreigner, and it was a way to get into the people's hearts. They wanted to know the foreigner and learn from the foreigner, but some of them were what we call rice Christians. They just wanted to be there for whatever they could get, and but many of them stuck. We still have a church there in Kampong Cham, and one in Suong, another place that we lived. After about 3 years, we moved to a place called Suong. There's a church there too. The